Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Spiritual OT. I am Steph Robertson. I'm super excited to have another person here for us to chat with today. This is Nicole Amery. She is a pediatric occupational therapist who is now specializing in parent coaching. Um, and Nicole specifically targets her work around the intersection between matrescence and neurodivergence. So I'm super keen to dive into this discussion because I feel like Nicole has so much to share on this area that perhaps not so many of us know about. So thanks so much for being here, Nicole.
Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. I'm super keen to get into this because I know that you and I have spoken a few times about the work that you're doing and kind of like the unique kind of space that you're filling within caring for this sort of population. But before I jump into that, I just want to ask, what can you tell us about you? What lights you up? What are your passions, your motivators? Let us get to know you.
uh, um, One of the massive things that lights me up is just conversations like this. I detest conversations that are meaningless and surface, and I love just doing the deep dive with people who are happy to do that with me. I walk away from conversations like I know we're about to have, feeling lit up and energized. Pretty much, like I can walk into one feeling there and then walk away feeling just a new person.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that.
Yeah, yeah. That said, I also love time to myself and time, like as a mum of three little ones, I love and no longer feel guilty about wanting and needing time to myself. I love yoga. That is a savior for me, really, and has got me through my matrescence. I don't even know what I would have done without yoga in pregnancy and postpartum, from a body perspective and from a soul perspective. So they're probably two of the things that light me up, and also just the work that I'm doing now. Like I just feel so lucky that I'm finally in this place where I'm doing the sort of OT work that actually lights me up after many years of that not being the case, and just trying to search for what like almost dropping out of doing OT as a profession after years of doing it to actually having my passion reignited, having finally found the bit that works for me. So
Yeah.
we just spoke about before we started the recording, I had just had 2 client visits. So driving through the countryside, going to visit families, giving them support. And it's like my ideal clients who are willing to do the work, have these conversations, be reflective about themselves, take on new information, learn, go with it. And I learn, of course, at the same time. I'm like, as I'm learning, I'm imparting information with them around ways that they can be neuroaffirming in their parenting. It's this back and forth conversation, and that lights me up as well. I'm pretty lucky.
I love that. And that's what we want, right? We want more people to be able to like spend their lives doing the things that make them come alive.
Don't get me wrong, there's the admin stuff behind the scenes that does not light me up, that I try and outsource as much as I can. And I have small tantrums about, but the bits when I'm just with the clients, awesome.
Yeah. I do share that. So tell me, what made you want to be an OT in the first place?
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know I wanted to be an OT. I think it was a pretty boring story. I just was in year 12 and had no idea what I wanted to. I knew I wanted to go to uni. I was the first one. No one in my family had ever been to uni, so they couldn't really give me a lot of advice. But I knew that's what I wanted to do. And then it was just a school counsellor who looked it up in the list of professions. I knew that I wanted to help people. I knew I wanted to work with children, but I didn't want to be a teacher. So I ended up, putting in my preferences, stuff like psychology and occupational therapy and social work and that sort of thing. And then I managed to get into OT, and I was, 17 when I started the degree,
Yeah.
like 20 when I finished it. And I just was really lucky that I was one of those few people who just found a degree that I loved, all of the learning that I did in the 4 years. And
Yeah.
then, had my struggles, as most people do in the early years, just trying to find my place in that profession. But all I knew was I wanted to help people, and I wanted to work with children and families. I diverted from that completely and ended up working in community aged care for years.
Yeah.
Now finally came back to
Yes. Love it. So back to our first little comment. Tell the people listening, what is matrescence and how did this become a really big passion area for you?
Yeah. So matrescence, in a nutshell, is the identity change and the complete transformation of a woman as she goes from maiden to mother. So, and that is across all of the parts in terms of like physically, obviously, hormonally, which is, you know, the big ones that people know about. We do change physically and hormonally. Then, you know, emotionally, financially, so economic wise, like we change. We may have been making money and then we're not anymore. And of course, spiritually, we have this generally this real realignment of and the questioning of who am I, what matters to me, what are my values really, what matters in my life, and on a broad, like we often start questioning things on a broader level as well through the process of matrescence, like what is the meaning of my life, but also what's the meaning of life in general, and you know start having this real passion for I don't know, making sure we're on the right track in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, I love it.
In terms of what drew me to that, my personal experience was, so I'm a mum of 3, and my eldest is 8 now, and I think things in terms of I didn't know it was called matrescence at the time. I'd learned about that that term when I was I had 2 children, so maybe about 2 to 3 years into my matrescence journey, or motherhood journey, because matrescence does start before you're actually a mother in quotation marks. So things were going along okay, I think. You know, as a first-time mum, I was, I think, coping pretty well. And then when I became a second-time mum, I think my levels of perfectionism and wanting control and order in my life was kind of thrown out the window, and I was really just struggling and feeling unsupported, just going through the motions really of like trying to on the outside portray that I'm doing really well. And if you ask people who knew me at that time in Sydney, which is where I was living, they were like, oh, but you were doing so well, you were doing this, you were doing that. And I'm like, yeah, on the outside, because I controlled everything and wanted to look perfect and be perfect. But on the inside, I was, just struggling. It ended up, what was the clincher for me that made me realize that something wasn't quite right and I needed support was that I would get really angry. And so this whole mother rage thing, which I felt like, and then I had huge amounts of guilt and shame around yelling and screaming at my 2-year-old. For stuff that was probably, you know, and I know she's neurodivergent now, but lots of it was probably just normal toddler behavior as well, my neurotypical behavior. But I was just struggling with it because she was fighting back and I was like wanting things my way, and I had this baby and no sleep, and I ended up trying to get support from a psychologist to use real behavioral strategies and I felt really just not heard, like really unheard in my experience. And her approach just didn't fit. But then I ended up getting into a group coaching program with Amy Taylor-Kavaz, who has now gone on to become like the matrescence expert in the space. I think that was the thing that started to lift me out of it. And like when she started to use the term matrescence, I was like, right, that's the thing I'm going through here. I get like, that's why my whole identity, who am I even, kind of and, you know, unpacking those feelings of guilt and shame, not only around the mother rage, but around not wanting to be around my children all the time, needing a break, but feeling like a perfect mother should want to just be around their children and be like, I'm a stay-at-home mum, so I should feel lucky that I'm able to do this. In many countries they're not, and blah, blah, blah. yeah, so having the opportunity to vent in that group coaching sort of space and have other people say, yeah, I feel that too, you know, that feeling of I'm not alone. I feel like that's what Matrescence offers us, is that the opportunity to know that it's a normal process. And yeah, once I started to go down that track of getting that the group coaching and then one-on-one coaching and support, I felt like that's what I needed. And so now that's what I guess want to be able to support other mothers through. It just happens that sort of the journey has taken me on this space, on this path of working with mums who are on the matrescence journey, trying to work out who they are and their identity. But there's also that neurodivergence sort of woven in there with their family.
Yeah. And I love that, because I think too, you're right about, like, there's just so much shame and guilt associated with not portraying oneself as being like this glowing, bubbly, joyful mother. And yet, in fact, the opposite is far more common, right? That women are struggling through this journey because it does feel foreign. It feels scary. It feels stepping into the unknown, like, which in all other aspects of like change and all that kind of stuff, we accept that it can be uncomfortable and clunky. And it's funny to think that we should assume motherhood would be any different. Um, and I just love this idea of being able to celebrate. We all celebrate the baby and we celebrate this new life coming into the world, and everyone is so excited about that. And that's wonderful. But this idea of celebrating the mother's journey as well and stepping into this new identity, because even like from an OT lens, the role of mother in one's life is just it's so vital. It's so powerful. And I think it is heavily like undervalued in a lot of cases. So I like love all of this, because matrescence has been quite new to me as well in terms of the actual understanding and study of the process and even naming it. Um, and I think, your knowledge that you have specifically around this is such a beautiful companion to the parent coaching role as an occupational therapist, because it allows for mothers in this case to be seen.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a huge part of my work. And I mentioned Amy Taylor Kabaz before. I went on to, in the end last year, do her Mama Rising matrescence coaching, like facilitator accreditation.
Yeah.
And it was just like that final piece of the puzzle that I needed kind of to put it all like together. And so now I draw heavily on my understanding of the matrescence process, including all the societal pressures and understandings and assumptions that you're mentioning that go along with that. So I'm often just asking questions and pointing things out to mothers in sessions that are related to the expectations that she's placing on herself and that society is placing on her in relation to her parenting of her neurodivergent child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how are you finding well, stepping into the role of being, a parent coach as an occupational therapist, which, as we know and talk about all the time, is becoming so much more popular and so valuable, and the amount of success that we're seeing from families is so amazing. So how are you finding stepping into that role and then combining the two together?
It's exciting now, but as I was starting out, it was nerve-wracking because I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But I wasn't seeing a huge number of therapists actually doing it. And so, I think we connected through one of the Facebook groups at some point. And you're like, yeah, that's what I do. I'm like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
And like, it's not just the two of us, of course, but it's still not the done thing. It's not your typical OT. Your typical OT in the PEDS space is one-on-one with children, plus or minus the parent in the room, right?
Yeah.
And I guess, and what I feel so strongly about is that if you're not going to involve and work with and empower the parent and educate the parent, then what's the point of it all? Because you can do a one-on-one session with a child for 45 minutes, maybe once a week or once a fortnight, but what happens in the middle of that if you're not involving the parents? So I mean, for any parents listening, I would say, like, if you're going to any therapist and they're not involving you in the therapy at all, and I get, like, I'm not saying you have to, if that's the sort of style of therapy you go to, that's fine. And if you need the odd chill out on your phone to get some online shopping done or whatever, happy days. But as long as you know what the therapist is doing, because I've come across so many parents who have come to me and they're like, well, we go to this therapist and they do this sensory stuff and I'm not really sure what, and I did this sensory profile. I asked I answered all these questions, but I'm not really sure about the report they gave and what it means. So I invite you as the parent to ask questions, like, don't come to us as, inverted commas, professionals and be told what to do, or just go along with the thing just because it's the parent is the therapist is the expert. I a lot of my time I spend trying to educate parents and help parents to trust that they are the expert of their child, and mums in particular will come and say, well, I don't feel like the expert. I feel like I'm getting it all wrong. I'm getting it all wrong. I don't know how to parent my child. But as we go on, the conversation has to only flow for another few minutes. And I'm like, see, you do know. Like, I ask some questions and, like, in the next sentence, they'll be like, and I'm like, yeah, see, you knew in your gut how you needed to parent your child in that moment. Whether you did or you didn't is another thing. But you generally, like, a mum knows, like, her intuition knows. It's just that my job is often there just to pull that out and to highlight it and to help the mum really just trust what she already knows.
Yeah, totally aligned with that. And it is true, right? People know what they need. They just need support tapping into it, or being able to believe in it, or accept where they're at any given time. And yeah, we can come with, strategies, and we can help problem solve, and we can give some ideas and things. But at the end of the day, I think also, like, the dynamic within families is so impactful on someone's experiences. So if that's the child that we're working with or whatever, the dynamics within that family are having, an impact ongoing. And I think it seems silly to focus intervention or attention on one individual within a constellation of connected nervous systems that are all living together and working together and co-regulating together. We need to be able to facilitate healing and growth within all members if possible, right?
100%. 100%. Like, co-regulation, you can't do co-regulation when the parent's nervous system is dysregulated.
Yeah. And I think often obviously we're talking about more traditional constellations of families, but often the mothers are like the heart of that connection. And and I feel like this is where the matrescence piece comes in so beautifully to this idea of, early childhood intervention and things like that, because, the mother and the child, they're not separate, right? Like, their nervous systems simply aren't. Like, when that child's in utero and they are literally sharing one body function, and the nervous systems become so attuned to one another. And then regardless of what happens, whether there is attachment issues or, like, whatever happens, there's still two very in tune nervous systems that are working here. And I feel like it only makes sense to look at both equally within this process. And I think this idea that you're talking about, this intersection between, like, the matrescence piece and the neurodivergence and stuff, is so, like, even for me, like, until you said it, I hadn't thought about it, and now it just seems so obvious. Like, it's just like, yes.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And because we could ignore the fact that there's a mother or a parent in the room and just therapy the child.
Yeah.
Or we can and that puts all of the or the word blame is coming to me. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but like all of the responsibility on the child to change.
Yes.
Or we can involve the parents and really it's our responsibility as parents, as hard as that is, and not that I'm suggesting we need to get it perfect all the time at all. It's our responsibility to support our neurodivergent children and our children in general,
Yeah.
and parent responsively to their needs. And how can we do that if we're not caring for our own nervous system? So if as the therapist, if you're sitting there just therapying the child, it's just not like, it's not family centered. Like I feel like, we bandy around the term family centered a lot in the therapy world, but I don't think we've done it particularly well, really. And I think, we need to take responsibility as therapists as well to be truly family centered, and to like just the home visit that I had just before, I prompted, they were talking about a daily issue that they were facing, and I ended up, like, after nutting it out with them quite a bit, I'm like, well, maybe we need to come back to family values. What are your family values that mean that your child needs to be respectful about the property and not be drawing on their furniture and stuff. And so, like, by bringing it back to what the family values are, you can actually really nut out whether it is an issue or whether it's not an issue. And back to the core, like, so it's taking the pressure and the responsibility away from the child. And yes, they can develop skills and abilities over the years, but it's working on stuff that matters to the whole family and getting some consensus around that.
Yeah, when I conducted some research back in 2019, 18 and 19, it found actually that, generally speaking, family-centered practice was not being done well, and that a lot of families didn't even know what that term meant, or that it was something that they should be receiving. Like, they were just like, I don't know what that is, when I was interviewing these families. And that's what really shifted my view on how and why I went into practice for myself, because I was like, well, I want to be able to operate in a slightly different way. I want to create a family-centered practice way of being. And I think sometimes there's like this headbutting that can occur between family-centered practice and neurodivergent affirming practice, because I feel like sometimes in family-centered practice, the family may have certain goals, but then when you look at the individual person, the neurodivergent person, and their specific needs, and it's about trying to blend the two, the knowledge, the acceptance, the authenticity, all of those pieces together. But I think we can't be neurodivergent affirming. We can't be creating environments and things like that for these individuals to thrive and be their true selves without involving all of the people around them, which of course includes their family, their school, their everyone.
Yeah, very valid point. In the situation I was just talking about, like, we're talking about taking care of property in one's room for the child versus a mum who likes everything to be really clean and in order. And we've been doing a lot of work together, the mum and I, around about bringing about her, like, she is very self-reflective and knows that that's what she's like, to the point where she's happy for her child to have a messy room. That's cool. That's your space. That's your. However, there's also some family expectations, and it's just having that conversation and trying to get everyone on the same page and some collaborative problem solving involving the child.
Yeah. So tell me, where did your passion for the neurodivergent affirming practice piece come in? Like, when did that become your jam?
Yeah, pretty recently, really. When I decided to step into my private work, that's pretty much like, and that's only within the last year, like, that I've become aware of what it is to be neurodivergent affirming as a therapist. And it's I've said that it feels like I'm a new grad again, in a way, even though I've been an OT for 20 years, because it's a completely different way of working, but it just feels right.
Uh-huh.
It just that's the best way I can put it. Like I've tried parenting multiple ways with my eldest, who's neurodivergent, and the affirming way just works, like for a more peaceful household. And I know, and we know from the lived experience evidence, from what neurodivergent adults are telling us, it's to work in an unaffirming, more behaviorist sort of way is what leads to long-term mental health issues. So
Yeah.
how could I support that, and how could I not want to I feel like that's the ultimate, and that's what I talk with parents all the time about, is that this, there's sort of often not overnight solutions to the problems that families are facing, especially if they've been parenting in a more behavioural sort of model. However, we've got to think long term, and if we don't want our children to be adults with anxiety and depression and a variety of mental health issues and worse, we can't continue parenting in that way. So it's a really, so many delicate conversations, like trying to be as respectful as possible and taking into account how we were raised as children, like having all of those deep conversations with parents to help them in their reflective process and to come to the eventual realization that to be neuroaffirming and just really accepting and loving and just loving our children for who they are in their neurodivergence and all the things. But it's gentle, I think, with parents, especially where there's been that different way of parenting, and particularly like sometimes it's the mum and the dad, or in your typical relationship with whoever the parents are, like just supporting them to come even to some agreement around their way of parenting. It's really tricky and delicate work. It's not easy work, but it feels 100% aligned in my heart to work in this way. So I sort of can't not.
Yeah. I totally relate to that. It really does. It's just an alignment piece, isn't it? It's like, um, you know, knowing that we're learning to accept and honor individual differences of people, and even like, when they talk about the neurodivergent movement, it's like a human rights movement. It's like it's the same as accepting the color of people's skin or their sexuality or anything like that, right? It's just, you're just accepting a person for who they are and not expecting them to change in order to make another person more comfortable, like,
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and yeah, and because I also feel like, I think too, and this is like, I'm just pondering this, I hadn't really thought about it that much before, but if we even look at just like the neurology of an individual in oneself, and the term that neurodiversity simply means like changes or differences in neurology, then the whole matrescence journey is a journey through neurodiversity of oneself, whether you're neurodivergent, like whether you identify as being autistic or ADHD. But if you think that the process of a woman in that period goes through changes in the way her brain is working, and if we applied the exact same affirming approach to the matrescence journey, to the journey of mother, to what new mothers are going through, like we could create such a nurturing and accepting environment, rather than it having demands and expectations placed on women. Like, you can see how the two really go hand in hand in a lot of ways.
100%. Yeah, we know like there is research now that there is a literal rewiring of a woman's brain as as they have a baby and go through early motherhood. And like there are some early studies around that fathers can go through that as well if they have lots of that skin on skin and like lots of early connection with their infant as well. There can be brain changes for the father as well.
How incredible.
Or for the non-birth giving parent. So it is incredible. But yeah, it is a change in neurology, and yet we're just expected as women to go back to who we like. There's this huge expectation that we
Oh
just
yeah.
get back to yourself, get back to your old self,
Pre-baby, pre-baby weight, pre-baby body.
get back to work, be exactly the same person when you re-enter the workplace, whereas actually you re-enter the workplace and you're like, what even is this? I don't even know if I fit here anymore. That was my experience anyway. And also things have changed. Like I can't even do the same role because I don't want to work full time, because I only want to work part time, and that's not supported. And that was part of my demise as well. Was like I no longer fit into the workplace because I was in management positions and I couldn't anymore because I didn't want to do full time. So there's all this resentment. But yeah, that's off topic from what you were just talking about. But yeah, our brains actually change, and there's there's very few people still know the term matrescence or have that understanding around all of the changes we go through. And it's why in many cultures, and Dr. Oscar Serralak, who coined the term postnatal depletion, refers a lot to this, that in other cultures, those first few months are deemed sacred. Like, and there's this first 40 days in lots of cultures where the woman, they sort of retreat into their tent or into their space, and it's just them and their baby, and all their job is just to feed and nourish the baby, and people, come, like, all the women support them around it. It's how it should be. And I think there is a coming back to that in some circles now, which is awesome, with the with the event of doulas. Like, doulas are becoming more popular, which is, I didn't even know what a doula was with my first pregnancy. Whereas, I had a doula to support me pre and postnatally with my 1-year-old, 18-month-old now. And, I went into my third birth and postpartum, like, fully aware of what matrescence was, about what my body and soul needed in the postpartum period, and in terms of food and nourishment. And I spent money, and like I used resources to support myself through that whole process. Went to a mother's circle for the first 12 months so I could be supported by a beautiful postpartum sort of counsellor / doula. And so I had that community connection and the listening space. And so I just really put all these supports in place for myself. But that's as a third-time mother. I knew nothing and did nothing of that first time round. I was just sort of flying blindly. Like, there's so much focus on just getting the baby out. It's all about birth, and then whatever, you're on your own.
Yeah.
I mean, I could talk about it for hours.
Well, it's such a beautiful story. Like, and even just you being having had 3 children, 3 experiences that you have had, and being able to compare what it was like having that knowledge. And because, I mean, how amazing is it when you are literally, knowledge is power? If women were actually told this stuff before they have children, so that when they do start feeling like their world's been turned upside down, they're not sat thinking, oh, what's wrong with me? This isn't normal. I must be failing as a mother. Rather, no, you are exactly where you should be. This is completely natural. You are simply going through the process of becoming a mother. Like, and if that was spoken about, if it was normalized, if it was, then it just seems so wild to me that so many mums carry around this guilt about, I'm not a good mother, because they experience big emotions or they don't feel like they can show up like they should. But if we all knew how much we all experience that then becomes the norm. So then what are we all comparing ourselves to? We're comparing ourselves to something that is a non-existent expectation that we've all created from the media, or from, like, where has this come from? And I think, social media and all that stuff doesn't help. And
it's interesting just to unpack that. Like, as we were growing up, as we were teenagers and young women, like, what were we watching? Like, I was watching Sex in the City.
Yeah.
Like,
I know, how realistic.
Yeah, these power women doing careers and having perfect bodies and perfect clothes and makeup and going out into the world despite having babies, and like, what the and if that's grown up, or young adults watching that and those sorts of expectations, of course we're just going to think that we should be like that. And I just had this thought that, oh yeah, I'll always want to be, a part-time mother, a part-time worker, like career woman. I've done all this work towards, and I had, family members say to me, well, when are you going back to OT, Nicole? And like that, when they said that to me the first time, I would have been like, oh yeah, yep, I better, yep, I'll get right onto that and get. Whereas now, third time around, I'm like, what, like I won't swear, but you know, what, like I'm postpartum, like deep in postpartum. I'm not even thinking about that. I don't have the brain capacity. Like sleep deprivation alone makes it so hard. And yet, countries like the USA have women going back to work 2 weeks after giving birth. Like, like we have a good thing in Australia in comparison.
I was just thinking then, and I have not thought into this because the thought just came into my head. So don't anyone come for me. But I was thinking, while like the feminist movement and for women being able to have equal opportunity in work and all that kind of stuff is fantastic, and I support it 100%. I'm wondering just in this moment whether there's also an element of that push too far where now women feel that they are supposed to be able to be mothers in this unique role, go through the experience of carrying a child, of creating a child within their body, of birthing that child, which in itself is a huge transition and often a trauma, and then step back into a role of someone who has not had that experience or is not now carrying the responsibility of another life around with them at all times for the rest of their lives. I feel like the expectation, and obviously it's all about choice. If you want to go back to work 2 weeks after you have a baby, that is your choice. But the reality is there should be an empowerment piece around the choice not to, that you are no less powerful of a woman, you are no less successful or productive if you choose to sit with the matrescence journey and be mother, right? So I'm wondering if the feminist movement of power to the women, which is wonderful, has been skewed a little bit towards productivity. That feminine empowerment means you are a productive woman with a high paying job. And it's kind of like, that's not quite how it needs to be, you know?
Yep. Yeah, we went into all of that in my in the Mama Rising motherhood coaching training that I did. Like, yeah, the rise of feminism, great in the 60s, you know, woohoo, get back into the workforce, and great, like, because women's rights. And yet, yeah, but we were expected to go back to work like we weren't a mother.
Yeah.
Like, no one ever empowered the men to stay at home then, or to be more supportive towards the women. And it like, this is, you know, the whole issue is for women as well as men. So the non-birthing partner, if they were supported to to stay at home more, be more involved in the caregiving, whilst the mother, the birthing mother, goes back to the workforce,
Yeah.
great. Like, well, better. You know,
Yeah.
the woman
Yeah.
all of these changes, and you know, he still needs more support in general. But you know, yeah, the women were told, yep, go back to workforce, but you still need to be the mother and do all of the things, and the father will just continue in his role. And that's not the men's fault; it's just what's happened.
Yeah.
I mean, like in my case with my third baby, we've created this, like, between my second and my third baby, there was about 5.5 years difference. So we've since moved into state where there's less financial pressure in Adelaide compared to Sydney.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to do as much work, and all of the pressure of that. And so that my husband could also, like, he's since started his own business. So in like the postpartum period, he was so present and so supportive and helpful in every way that he could be
Yeah.
for, and it was just a completely different experience. It's not to say that I still didn't go through days and weeks that were really hard, of sleep deprivation and questioning whether I had postpartum depression and, you know, all of these things. But he was there. It would have been so much harder if I was trying to, like, do all the school drop-offs and and maintain all the things that I should be older to, plus add the third one into the mix. And that's what most women are forced to do in today's society, especially with the recession at the moment. Like, it's even worse.
Yeah.
There's a huge financial pressure on families as well. So how could a woman be asking her husband to work less or earn less when
Yeah.
this sort of scenario? But yes, you brought up yes, it's 100% valid what you've just talked about. You mentioned another thing in there that I wanted to touch on as well, but I've forgotten now. Yeah, no, I've lost it.
That's okay. So where can we learn more about about matrescence? Like, are there any resources you recommend or places that women can find out more
Mm.
about this?
That's relevant to what, yeah, well, I've just remembered. So if people are interested to learn about more of the sociology of motherhood, the
Mm.
historical, like how we came to be where we are now from a sociological perspective, Dr. Sophie Brock on Instagram and Facebook is amazing. So she's a sociologist. Do you follow her?
I don't know that I do.
Yeah,
How do you
she's
spell the surname?
Brock, Brock.
Yeah, cool.
So Dr. Sophie Brock is amazing to follow around all of that. She
Yeah,
has a podcast as well called The Good Enough Mother. So going back to
sounds
what you said
amazing.
before, like, around perfect mothering, she's
Yeah.
created her own sort of sociological models around motherhood and all of the social expectations and how good enough mothering is good enough and we don't need to be
Mm.
perfect parents. That's from attachment theory as well, as we know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Amy Taylor Kabaz, I need to acknowledge that a lot of what I know is from her and the resources that she has given me. She does, like if anyone listening is interested in being a motherhood coach,
Yeah.
she is an accredited motherhood coaching program called Mama Rising.
Oh,
Um,
rising. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah, it's a good name.
Yeah.
Um, Oh, no, I follow a pretty, like, my Instagram feed is pretty much full of neurodivergence and matrescence. It's hard to remember all of the ones. Yeah, they're the two that sort of stick out to me right at this moment.
Um,
Um,
so tell us where people can find you. Tell us about your Instagram, Facebook, website. Where can people connect with you if they want to?
so I'm at Nourish and Connect. That's my handle on Instagram and same for Facebook. And I do have a website as well. Probably needs a bit of an update, but that's cool. Yeah, but I provide one-on-one coaching and occupational therapy to um, mothers and parents, and particularly parents who parenting neurodivergent children who may or may not be questioning their own neurodivergence. So a lot of support around that point of diagnosis for themselves or their children, what that means for them and their identity. That's what I'm super passionate about, is just that real who am I identity piece. Yeah, so if anyone wants to reach me, they're the main avenues, I think.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
I'll put your links and stuff in the notes when I upload this video. So if you guys want to find Nicole, you can probably find her down there. I'll put website or Instagram or whatever it is that you want me to put in there. But before we go, is there anything else that you wanted to share or that you think is really important for us to be talking about at this point?
Um, yeah, probably just that. Yeah, like if you are going through the process, or you have recently, of your child being diagnosed as neurodivergent, whether that be ADHD or autism or dyslexia or any of the things, and you're questioning your own neurodivergence and thinking back to what you were like as a child and what you're like now, what you struggle with, and blah, 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 then that's completely normal. and feel free to chat with your therapist, your children's therapist about it, or your loved ones if you have people you can talk with. Journal it out. I'm a massive fan of journaling as well.
Yes.
But yeah, just feel free to reach out for support because it's totally normal. And if you're neurodivergent yourself, then it might be creating even more challenges around the parenting that you're needing to do, and it might lead to a lot more self-compassion, which is like where I always start with parents, is that self-compassion piece, whether you're neurodivergent or not. But often if you end up finding out, oh yeah, I am, whether that's a self-diagnosis or a formal diagnosis, and it can be really supportive of your ability to be self-compassionate and to parent your children, I think. That would be the main thing. And also, if for therapists and parents out there, and this is in the Australian context, if you do have NDIS funding, you can it's okay for you to get support. Like if the funding is attached to your child and they are the NDIS participant, it's okay for you to use some of their funds to support yourself. You know, that is part of the capacity building, because as we briefly mentioned, co-regulation, the co-regulation between a child and a parent can't happen if the parent is dysregulated. So if you need support from your children's therapist to talk about your own stuff and the struggles you're having with parenting, and say, you know, I'm spending a lot of the time yelling or feeling angry or annoyed or resentful or any of those things, all completely normal, and it's okay for you to get support so that you can have a more regulated nervous system to support your child's regulation, because they can't be expected to be regulated if you're not. And that's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
But you know, that's the reality of it. So don't be afraid to reach out for support from your therapist. Don't think that you have to muddle through the parenting part alone and your children get all of the therapy.
That's such a good point, Nicole. I'm so glad you shared that, because I get asked that too. Like, oh, can I use my funding? Yes, you can use the funding to do this parent coaching stuff, and it is part of the capacity building. So really well done thinking of that. Such good advice. But thank you so much for being here and for sharing your experiences as well as your expertise in this area. And I think it's wonderful that you are combining the two, bringing that, you know, matrescence piece into supporting parents of, you know, neurodivergent children, or, you know, children with disabilities in general, because that's just adding another layer to it, right? Like, you know, what it means to parent a child that was not what you expected it was going to be. Like, it's a whole nother layer. And so I think it's just so beautiful, the work you're doing. And I really 100% suggest everyone check out the stuff that Nicole's doing. And if you are, you know, looking for some support in this area, then yeah, hit her up.
Thanks, Steph. Love the work you're doing as well, leading the
Thank
way.
you. Yes. But yes, we'll have to have another chat soon. And yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Welcome.